Welcome to Shelf Talkers, a podcast from Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City. Welcome back to Shelf Talkers, all you villagers out there. This is Jared Castlebaum, once again your host for this episode. This episode was a very fun time. Is it a mystery why this episode was such a fun time? No. But was the content of this episode a mystery? In a sense. You'll understand what I mean about that in a minute. My co-host on this episode was the great Tom Rubio, one of my co-booksellers here at Village Well, also the head of the sci-fi and fantasy book club himself, a wonderful conversationalist. This episode was such a good time. We got to interview GT Karber. He's a programmer turned mystery game writer. He's the author of the international best-selling Murdle series. Now, Murdle combines murder mystery storytelling with logic puzzles, allowing the reader to dive into the life of deductive logico themselves, taking part in the discovery of around 100 Murdles just in the first book alone. Now, these logic puzzles are interactive games you get to complete with clues and grids and deduction, and the answers to the puzzles carries you along the story of the book. It's very, very inventive. If you've been to Village Well in literally any time in the last year, you've seen Murdle on our best-selling paperback nonfiction shelf, and potentially its 2 sequels. And you might be seeing its forthcoming 2 new entries into the series, Murdle Volume 4, along with Murdle Jr. for kids coming out in November of this year. The first book in the series won the 2024 British Book Award despite not being British, but in Sherlockian fashion, the Brits love some murder mysteries, and GT fit right in there. GT Karber is a charming and wonderful writer whose love of murder mystery and puzzles shines throughout the interview, and we were honored to have him on the podcast. This interview dives into game design, murder mystery writing, why murder mysteries seem to be having a bit of a resurgence in modern popular culture. That's such a fascinating part of the interview, and a bit of what is next for the Murdle brand, among much more. Dig into it, and maybe go see for yourself who was murdered. GT, how are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It's fun watching authors hear their accolades, and you like smile and kind of perk up. You're like, oh yeah, that is the amount of books I wrote, isn't it? That's
great.
Fun.
Yeah. It's been wonderful. It's funny. No, I loved being called prolific because as a kid, I always thought it was like the coolest thing ever when an author had like 90 books.
Right.
And I was always so bummed. Like I loved Douglas Adams.
Okay.
And I think he like total wrote like seven novels or something in his whole life. And it was like,
that's a low count. Not enough to be prolific.
I would have loved like 50. And I personally am not a prolific person. I don't write a lot, but because I have all these like deadlines, it's kicked it into gear. So I feel like I'm actually able to...
You're able to get it all done.
Yeah, become the prolific author of my childhood fantasy. I don't know. It's tough to finish something without a deadline.
Totally.
Yeah,
I mean, especially now that you've got this. I mean, you've got probably so much demand.
Yeah.
People are saying, hey, if you write more puzzles, I'll make more money. So I need you to be prolific.
Yeah, it's great to have people encouraging you to finish things rather than like, when you're working on it alone, you just kind of have to motivate yourself. And my thing would always be that I'd get like 70% through something and be like, wow, this would be so much better if I started from the beginning, just completely rethought everything, which you can't do when you've sold the book and they like, really, we need it.
And you're like, but I'd like to do it all again, please.
Yeah, and they're like, no, you can do it all again for the next one. I'm sorry, I really jumped in.
No, I love that. That's so good. Our first question that we love to ask, because this is called Shelf Talkers, as you'll see around our store, if anybody comes into Village Well, we have these little note cards on the shelves. We call those our Shelf Talkers, and those are staff picks, usually, of books that we recommend. Tom has written a bunch. I've written a bunch. All the staff writes them. So would you, GT, be willing to write a Shelf Talker for Murdle? So this is like a 1 to 2 sentence pitch, like a vibe check of something that someone might like about Murdle.
Sure.
How would you pitch it?
I always tell people that Murdle is a collection of murder mystery logic puzzles that anyone can solve. And this wouldn't go in the Shelf Talker, but to explain that, I just feel like a lot of times I'll pick up different murder mystery puzzle books. I've like obsessively looked over this, and so many of them are just they're brilliant, but they're very difficult and very challenging, and there's 60 pages of clues and
for one puzzle.
And it's overwhelming, and you look at it. So Murdle is something that anyone can solve, And I also like to tell people that it's family friendly, except for the murders, of course.
Yes. Yeah, the Murdles.
Right, the Murdles. Yeah, which is the family-friendly way to say murder.
The family would say somebody is dead on the ground right
I'm
here.
hoping that'll supplant unalive to be the way that people censor themselves on TikTok. Yeah, I feel like that would be really great.
That's great. That's great.
Well, so maybe that's a good segue then to jump into a question that I had about game design. So how did you find that balance, in difficulty, between something like attainable and something that wasn't going to like drive you crazy, and something that still feels like a good challenge to solve, like
still satisfying finish? Absolutely.
Like was there anything specific that went into like did you have people game test it before? And
yeah, it was a lot. I mean, I think that's like the challenge in puzzle design and game design. Is kind of what I was getting at too, with the book being accessible to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was really a thing. It helped. I made the first one for a friend of mine at a coffee shop. I like just doodled it on a napkin and like sent him a picture of it.
Yeah.
And he loves like much harder puzzles. So, when I was developing it, I wasn't just trying to make it something that he loved. The first one was a little more challenging. In fact, the first one was broken. I didn't make it right. So
like as in it was unsolvable?
Yeah. It had multiple answers. So, but that it is a challenge. And I think for Myrtle in generally for puzzles, there's not really like a one size fits all solution. You really have to have like a wide range of them, and some are going to have to be too easy for some people, and some are going to have to be too hard for other people, because it really is just about not just like their aptitude, but their experience with puzzles. And it's impossible to like thread that needle. And that's why in the first book, there's like 4 different difficulty levels.
Right.
Initially, the editor, my wonderful editor at St. Martin's, Courtney Littler, she was very big on the idea of it being like a crossword book or like a Sudoku book, in that you just like flip it open and pick, the one that fit the difficulty level.
Right.
And so that's how this started. But then as I was actually writing it, like the narrative kind of emerged, and it became such that like, if you don't do it from like beginning to end, it's kind of a little
thing.
Yeah,
Will the puzzles be unsolvable?
No, you could open it up and do any puzzle to begin with, and you'd be able to solve it. And the only thing is sometimes like tricks or codes are introduced, and the hint for the first puzzle that includes that clue will explain that
how to do the
code,
but not necessarily the clue itself.
Yeah, well, like for example, one might be like every letter in this sentence is replaced by the letter that follows it, which I call the next letter code. Yes, should be pretty clear. But
yes, I did that one in prep for this interview. I've been doing Puzzle 21.
Right. Yes. Well, there's a couple. So like in a later one, it won't tell you how to do that.
Right.
So if you flip to the back and try to do a puzzle, it might be a little more challenging.
Well, and they're just bigger. I mean, they're like what, 4 categories by the end?
Yeah, they become it becomes a much more elaborate puzzle as it goes on, and they take longer to make and to solve.
But you're introducing like new mechanics as the narrative progresses as well.
Yeah, and it's difficult to sort of do that in a way. I'm not a very methodical laborer. Like when I work on it, it's very intuitive. I jump around a lot, and sometimes that makes it a little harder to track the individual progression.
Yeah,
but that's a key thing to make sure that you don't overwhelm somebody too soon.
Well, that idea kind of surprised me, because you have a background as a programmer, correct?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird. That's something that became part of my bio and stuff. And I've never like.
It's a good narrative for a publisher to be like, he was a programmer, but now he is a best-selling author. It's a very like American dream.
I do think there's something. Yeah, finally. No, but no, it's like I never programmed professionally. Like I loved to code like little games, like web toys and
cool
little things. This is like sort of I've probably made like 15 or 20 Myrtle-sized web toy game kind of things.
Cool.
That like everything doesn't really catch on in the same way. And so
you're saying like different versions of repeatable puzzle designs.
The idea that it being like a daily puzzle and a puzzle itself that you would return to, that's new for me.
I see.
But I made little interactive fiction stories and
cool
websites that are like have some sort of game-ish element to them, and
Because if you don't know as a listener, there is not only is this a book, but the book is on some level a collection of all of these web games, which have been daily, and they're still daily.
Yeah. So you can go to Murdle.com.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, and you can play a new murder mystery logic puzzle every day.
Yeah. So you don't have to buy the book right now if you want to go online,
Right.
get one of those puzzles, then come in buy the book because you need 100 more.
Yeah. It's like our daily free sample.
As you've been designing that, I know you've mentioned in interviews past of that on some level this is also a bit of a opposition to like mindless video gaming.
Right.
How does that still feel like that part of the motivation, or was that just part of the inception?
To me, I'm a compulsive person, I guess, and part of that is compulsive like game playing. I can get hooked on right now it's playing games of bullet chess, so it's like 1 minute chess game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like blitzing.
And you could do this like you can start and end a chess game, in line for something,
Right.
or at
That's
any
addictive.
time you're frustrated at anything that you're working on. And so it becomes this situation where sometimes I've probably played like 25,000 bullet chess games. I mean, it keeps track of them. And it's just like too much. And it's not something that really even gives me joy anymore.
What's your chess score? What's your
my like rating?
Yeah,
It's not good.
not
It's
good.
not good.
Okay.
Yeah, it varies depending on how late I've stayed up. But on
What's your rating, Jared?
And not that much. I'm like 800 something on a 10-minute blitz.
Oh yeah, I'm a little I mostly play on Lee chess.
Okay.
And I will go between like 14 and 1600.
Really?
But, like-
That's. I've tried to play somebody like you once. It did not go well.
Well, the thing with chess that's so crazy, and not to get into chess, but it's like there's always someone so much better than you,
Right.
and often that person is an 8-year-old.
Is it 1600 like pretty freaking high?
That's
That's got to be top 1%.
It's not anywhere close to top 1%.
Really?
Maybe top
1600s?
maybe top 1% among like
Among
all
chess.com.
human beings.
Oh, yes.
But not among. I like
Not
to
among the
tell
players.
Right. I like to tell my friends that I can beat anybody who doesn't play chess, and everybody who does play chess will beat me. That's
Have you ever thought about a rating system for Murdlers?
It's interesting because the only thing I could really find to rate people on is their time.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you share when you beat it online.
Sure.
And I actually think that's a really horrible metric for Solomon and Myrtle because
How fast can I enjoy this?
Yeah.
The least amount of time.
I don't want to race people through them. I want you to take your time on it. So I never put a clock on the side. It tells you how long it took after you did it. But I don't want to tell someone while they're working on it, like, hey, pick up the pace, buddy.
you don't want a Myrtle speedrunning community to develop. That seems antithetical
Well,
to the
I
spirit.
do say in the first book, and I don't remember what it is. This is a little bit of a embarrassing. Maybe I shouldn't even admit this, but in the first section, it says there's a challenge, and it says that someone beat this first section in 36 minutes, and that's made up. Nobody.
I would have believed that.
That seemed like a
but
pretty
it
good
that's
time.
when he beat the whole book.
No, in the first section.
Oh, just the
I
first-
say that a detective club member did it, and I don't know why I'm revealing that's fiction.
I love that. So I mean, it's
Fraudulent claim.
there's narrative throughout the whole book, so it makes sense. So it makes sense that there'd be fiction and
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge I love a certain kind of meta art that
yeah.
isn't really sort of self-indulgently fourth wall breaking, but that is kind of exists in our world in a sense.
Yeah.
To me, I loved the Jason Segel Muppets movie.
Oh yeah.
because in that movie, the Muppets start out, they're not famous anymore. And then over the course of the film, the Muppets become famous again in the movie.
In their world.
Yeah, and then for 5 or 6 years after that movie came out, people acted as if the Muppets were A-list celebrities again. They kind of tricked people into thinking that the Muppets were back, even though
They never left.
Yeah, that was what the vibe was. And so I really try to do that kind of stuff in everything I write. I really want to sort of bring the reader into it a little, and then try to make the boundaries of the world a little loose so that sometimes things in the world kind of can slip out in a sense. And so there's so much stuff in this book that was sort of about the making of the book. The opening section is about Logico getting a book deal and going into publishing. And that was because I had, 3 months to write this book, and I was like,
what's going on in my life right now?
Right.
A little bit of auto fiction.
Yeah.
When you do write, do you see yourself as a puzzle maker, or are you drawn to those narrative parts, or how does that break down when you write?
I would say for these books, the narrative is what I think about, but then it's very intuitive. So the next adult Myrtle book that's coming out is called The School of Mystery.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's going to have 50 puzzles, and there's going to be more rather than 100, and there's going to be more the exhibits are going to be a little more interactive.
Ooh, wow.
And so there's like some of the puzzles are a little more complicated. It's not necessarily that much harder, but it is a little more like immersive in a sense.
Sure.
And I want to create the feeling of like you attending the School of Mystery, which is the deduction college from this book.
That's cool.
And kind of give the reader the feeling of like going through the same experience that the characters did.
Okay.
But, I'm excited to see how people take it, because you never really know until it's in somebody's hands.
And when is that coming out?
Yeah, that's next year?
No,
This
it's
year?
coming out in, I think, October.
Oh, no way.
I'm a little confused
That's
because...
book 4.
Yeah.
Book
And-
4 for adults.
Right. And then there's also Junior, which I think is in November in the States.
Yes.
But it'll, I think, be in October in the UK. All of the release dates have gotten muddled in my mind.
They needed it earlier over there after what happened.
Yeah, after it took off. I mean, it's obviously
love it.
big here. I mean, that was something we had written. Like, obviously, Myrtle is big here. It's like I kind of joked in the introduction, but if you've been at Village Well in the last year, Myrtle has stayed on our paperback bestseller shelf, I think, that entire time.
Yeah.
And then for brief periods of time, the 2 sequels as well when they came out. But the first Myrtle has been on there. And it's the only book of its kind that is on those lists, to at least at the ones that we carry. And then you won the 2024, not just the puzzle book or mystery book of the year, but the British Book of the Year award.
Yeah.
Despite not being British.
Right.
One, how did that come about? And two, my main question, I guess, is like, at what point did you realize you had a hit? Because it feels like the type of thing that could go under the radar and like would have a strong community. And that doesn't surprise me that this would have like a very strong community of people who follow it. But the fact that it also took off on such an international level, I mean, like, at what point were you like, wow, this is going to be a bigger thing than I thought?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly, because when you publish a book, when you make anything, everybody kind of like always tells you it's going great.
Yeah.
When it comes out, I was very nervous that first week, because I was like, oh my gosh, my first published book. I hope this goes well. I hope that it's not, a total catastrophe. And I asked my editor like a couple days in, I was like, well, how is it doing? What's going on? And she was like, oh, I think it's the best book launch I've ever had.
Wow.
And,
like,
which
you have to say that.
Yeah, that's how I reacted. I was like, well, that's, curiously non-specific. There's no details in that. And then this woman who makes who does mystery reviews on TikTok, who goes by the handle Mystery Manon, she made a TikTok about it, and the TikTok blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And that immediately boosted sales everywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
Wow.
And was a big thing for the website, and really kind of changed the fortunes of the book, I think, because it introduced it to a lot of people like a couple weeks after it came out, and it kind of kicked off. But frankly, even then I still was like, this is going to fade.
Yeah.
We got a viral TikTok. This is not anything I'm going to be able to...
Next week, people won't even remember.
Right. And so right then after that viral TikTok, we sold another couple books in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just wanted to lock it in as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Sure.
Because I've spent that first, several months convinced that it would, fade, and I needed to lock in as much of my financial future as I could before they realized what horrible mistakes they'd made and threw me out, into the gutter or whatever, which is, I assume, what happens to an author.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of authors in gutters.
Just thrown into the gutter. It's a brutal business.
Yeah.
But it really, it's truly wild to say this, because I think it speaks maybe to my inability to, appreciate, things, that it really was when we were in the UK and it was looking like it might be their number one book for Christmas, which is a big, they love in the UK, they love doing their Christmas number ones thing.
Mm-hmm,
That's a huge, they do that for movies, for albums, and for books. And when it was the number one book for Christmas in the UK. And I'm the third non-British author to ever do that.
One of them, Obama.
Yeah, Michelle Obama and Dan Brown for the Da Vinci Code.
No way.
That is
one of
company right
The
there.
only other two non-British people who have won not the British Book Award, but specifically got #1
in the
for
#1
holiday
selling
gifts.
Yeah, for
Wow.
for the week of Christmas. That's like the metric that they have. And honestly, it was like that. It was like, oh, I guess it's successful.
Yeah.
and it really is wild that it took that much.
Before you clicked into like,
Yeah.
oh shoot, this is gonna be here for a minute.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah.
like, oh, this is maybe my life now.
Yeah, this is now gonna be like the obituary line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Not to be too dark, but
Right,
you know,
yeah. When I get Murdle.
yeah, when you get Murdle, we're solving it. Yeah.
No, I periodically tell my agent, like, if I get murdered, you need to like get on the phones right now, start
You capitalize on
Yeah,
it.
sell as many books as you can on the wake of my
The true
unfortunate
crime about the
demise.
murder of the Myrtle guy. Oh my gosh, Netflix would buy that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I wonder if we can get the rights to that somehow, to my own death.
Right to
Maybe
your
we
own
can
death.
sell that somehow.
Yeah.
So do you have any, I mean, because, you know, overall culturally, like the book, you know, kind of came out and rose in a time where murder mystery is kind of having a moment. I mean, you have like the Knives Out series, which is insanely popular. You have the Agatha Christie films that are being made now, which I feel like have all been amazing.
Yeah, I loved all of them. Yeah.
And, you know, then of course your books. And do you have like a sense as to why that might be happening right now?
Yeah, I have theories.
Yeah.
I don't know that my theories are right, you know?
They're going to be more right than ours.
I think, well, there's this historic thing that happened with mysteries, which is that they were very popular in the sort of interwar era between World War I and World War II. That was like this first sort of golden age. And then post World War II, we sort of, in the States at least, kind of go into like a sort of Mickey Spillane kind of like guy with a gun culture, which is different than like a whodunit. It's more, it becomes, the shift occurs, it stops being, can we solve this mystery, and starts being like, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
And I think that that like the whodunits mysteries are popular in a time where we feel like, and this is maybe kind of grim to say, but society's not really running like we would like it to.
Yeah.
And we think there must be something wrong here. And there's this sort of cultural unease as we're trying to figure out what is like falling apart.
Yeah.
And I think that for the original Golden Age, a large part of this was that the British Empire was declining. And they, you know, if you read these Agatha Christie books, there's always this concern of the idea that things used to be better, now things are worse, there's something going wrong. And then over the course of the book, Poirot or Miss Marple solves the mystery, uncovers what we now know was the problem, and then we get rid of that person, and then society can flourish again. Yeah. And I think that we're kind of living in uncertain times now, and people, they sense something is wrong, but they don't really have the clarity that like beating the Nazis gives you.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, we just need to like pummel the bad guys.
Right.
And so now we're in this confusion.
Yeah,
you know?
usually in the post-World War II era. So what's the difference then between the murder mystery where it gets solved, and then you're saying the man with a gun? What's the different cultural milieu that?
To me, that it reflects sort of like post-World War I, we felt like this was a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
Like something catastrophic had happened, and the world was plunged into war, and we want to avoid that ever happening again.
Right.
We don't really know how to avoid that, because we're not 100% sure even how it happened.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's a bunch of competing theories. There's a bunch of I mean, you always remember learning about World War I in history class, and the explanation for World War II is always like, is there these
Nazis
really bad guys?
Yeah.
It's a really horrible, they tried to conquer the world. And World War I is always like, okay, so there was this guy that was shot.
Yeah,
some other people were
But
upset
but there was
about
no
it.
clear bad guy.
Yeah, and they're like, everybody teamed up, and there were all these secret alliances, and like,
And then somehow, like, the Russian Tsar and the Queen of England were, like, second cousins, and you're like, wait, but they're fighting each other?
Everybody, yeah, and so you have the rise of, like, the Bolsheviks in Russia, and everybody has different theories, and we form the League of Nations afterwards, and I think there's this sense of, like, we've got to figure this out. And then World War II happens, and it's just like, oh, we just had to kill people.
Yeah.
Like, that was our lesson. And so those books that come out post World War II are books about a guy who, like, we know it's this like evil mob boss, and if only you know that our hard-boiled detective can shoot his way.
Yeah, they're enacting justice.
Yeah. And personally, I love the mysteries. I love the, figure it out, piece it together. I feel like that to me models a kind of behavior that I think is healthier for people. It's better to solve mysteries than it is to like think that you're gonna like punch your way out of a problem.
Yeah. So you're saying, especially in those Man with a Gun stories, you're saying that the mystery, there's not really a mystery. We know who the bad guy is, but the story becomes, how do I defeat the bad guy?
Finding him.
Yeah.
Frequently in those stories, there is some sort of mystery. There is some sort of, you're not 100% sure.
Yeah, I know it's not black and white.
But Poirot never had to throttle a guy.
Yeah.
There's all of these old Agatha Christie mysteries where the person, they piece it together, they pin it on the person, and, they never are like, I'm not going to speak until I have an attorney present. They wrap it up. They like admit that they did it.
Right? Yeah. And the law comes in.
Yeah.
And actually like works.
Fully functional legal system.
What is that like?
Can immediately handle.
So there is an interesting difference there within like vigilantism.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great
Man
point.
with a gun thing.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to just punch the Nazi.
Yeah. And I think that, obviously like the beating the Nazis was great. And it's good.
I think we all agree.
We think we can all agree to that.
We can all agree.
But I don't necessarily know that the lesson being like, oh, we just got to shoot people is, makes for the literature that I like the most. That's my theory, though. And I think now, also, I think that maybe there's a similar thing with, like the Western genre sort of became our superhero genre. And I feel like that's a very different, functions psychologically very different from a mystery. And I think that people generally are feeling like that genre is like losing steam.
Yeah.
We're not excited about those movies anymore. And I'm like crossing my fingers that mysteries, are the supplant.
Well, I do feel like totally like, we were kind of joking before this. So many like early 2000s or late 90s, like mystery movies and stuff kind of felt very cringe and like almost like you were embarrassed to love it.
Yeah.
And then now the new string of like in the last decade, mystery is like, I don't know if I'd say it's cool, but it doesn't feel like it's on the outside or even like this thing that the nerds like. It's just like part of culture.
Yeah.
I would say it's cool.
I mean, I think it's cool. I love the internet. It's about things you like, but I think that it's like, what societally deems as cool. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting kind of trend away from it being cringy, but I wonder if that's, not to call the thing you love the most in the world cringy, but I wonder if then to see people love mystery because they're saying, you have a quote, you wrote it down. What was the quote that you wrote down that was so cool about it?
This is
from a different interview, right?
So a quote that I found that I was fascinated by was that you said in dark times, solvable death is a huge thing. And it kind of goes back to like,
I remember hearing he wrote it down, but that's a great one.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about like being in line and being stressed about everything else in your life, but you have something daily that makes sense that you can solve and that gives you a sense of progression.
Yeah.
And how important that is.
Yeah, like, I think a key to its success in some way is something that I could not have engineered, which is that I'm not like an obsessive puzzle person. I don't want them. I don't solve puzzles every day. I play the New York Times, like, the mini. I do the mini.
Oh yeah, me too.
Connections and stuff.
Yeah.
But like the friend that I made the first puzzle for, he goes to like a bar on Wednesdays where the like most difficult trivia, like everybody in the whole bar is won a game show. And
that's so cool.
And the questions are, like inscrutably complex.
Yeah.
Right. And if we go do trivia, we go to like the bar down our street where the normal people play trivia.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the kind of puzzles I like are
accessible.
They're for the common folk. And I don't think I could have intentionally done that had I been super into the hardest puzzles in the world.
Yeah. I
think I would have either, it would have felt condescending if I was making really simple ones.
Sure.
And people still like, when you talked about earlier about the setting the difficulty level, the second section in this book should be the third section difficulty.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Just in terms of how people, and maybe it's good that it gets harder and then a little easier and then, much harder, but it's something that I didn't really know until thousands and thousands of people tested it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then you hear these things, and then you can adjust. But it's so strange, especially with a mystery, especially with puzzles, in that you're sort of like laying down a gauntlet for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a hard balance to strike, to figure out what clues will be obvious and which will be inscrutable.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting that with the quote of like having that little bit of certainty in your day. It's like the with that Navy guy, I forget, the make your bed guy.
Oh,
You've seen that speech where it's all about like, if you can make your bed, you can like,
It's like
you
a
have that as the
graduation.
foundation for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
It's almost like make your bed and do your Murdle.
If I could get in there with making beds as something,
What a big PR shit.
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
But like to do something certain, which I do think is also the appeal of connections or mini or whatnot, is like, I know I can do this, and then I'll take it's the same reason why working out in the morning feels good. Not that I do it, but that you start your day knowing you had at least a little bit of self-improvement.
Sure.
And then you go from the rest of your day going, well, the rest of your day doesn't need to crush because I know I've at least progressed a little bit today. Yeah. And I think that like it does give that same little scratch on the back of like, hey, you did this.
Right.
You're a competent adult. Yeah.
And we met with the New York Times puzzle people, and they told me a statistic that I thought was really wild, which is that they said that 95% of Wordle players on any given day solve the Wordle that day.
Mm-hmm.
So 95% is like most people when they make puzzles, they're not only do they not get anywhere near that number, they're actually shooting for like the opposite.
Yeah,
they want
it to be a 1 in 20 get it. They want to give it to a group of people and have one person stand up and be the king of the puzzle solvers.
Right.
And I think that like there's definitely a place for that. It's fun to like, do a challenging puzzle that takes your afternoon.
Yeah.
But that's not what this is. That's not what Myrtle is. These are you can solve it if you sit down and focus.
Right.
You'll be able to unravel it. And I think, and I've made this distinction before between puzzles that are based on like an aha moment where you really have to sit there and figure out like what is the like aha, of this puzzle. And puzzles like crosswords, which maybe have little mini ahas, but which are mostly just something that you kind of work through.
You just grind it out.
The labor of leisure.
Yeah. No, exactly. Did I say that, or is that just
I think
a
you
thing?
said that,
I was like, oh, that's a really cool phrase.
I really related to that, and I was like, wait a second.
That's also a you. Well, we got to wrap up kind of soon, but as a hot take question, Agatha Christie or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and why?
Oh, well, for sure for me, Agatha Christie.
Okay.
I, in the pandemic, kind of obsessively read probably 40 or 50 of them.
Jeez.
40 or 50?
Wow.
Talk about prolific.
Yeah, but it's like half of her books.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, I honestly, like, I could probably start that 40 over, because with the exception of a couple that's, really rooted in, like, I don't recall.
You forget by the time you get
Yeah.
to number 40, you forget what happened at one.
She is perfect at like giving you the thing that you sort of know what it'll be, and you get to experience it again, and it's the joy of it. But I actually I never read the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Oh, really?
As like in the Arthur Conan Doyle versions
Yeah.
until like 6 months ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was kind of blown away how good they were.
Yeah.
You are sort of like, oh, I get why this is
Why this is famous.
why this was like the it's actually one of the first huge fan culture works. And I think that it's, to get back into the thing of like the world leaking out of the book, that hits huge on that, because the stories are all presented as Watson's, factual telling of the events.
Right.
And they reference real places.
Yep.
And they reference previous cases of Holmes, some of which were in stories, and some of which are just part of the
lore.
The lore.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And the way in which the lore seems like endless for Sherlock Holmes, and also identical to the real world in a sense.
Yeah.
It just creates this feeling of like, oh, I could be in this world. Like, maybe I'll help Sherlock Holmes out on the next case.
Yeah.
And there's something to that that's just so, it's really, unparalleled in that way. But Christie will always be my
number one.
Yeah, she's great. She's phenomenal.
Yeah. She is a goat.
Yeah.
And there's like 150 of them or something.
Yeah.
There she has detective characters like that I have not even read. So there's like a
whole series.
Yeah, there's like a 5 or 6 book series of like a couple that solves mysteries, where each book they're like I could be getting this wrong because I haven't read them, but each book they're like 10 years older. It's like their whole life over the course of
that's
like
cool.
5-6 books.
And have those ever been turned into a movie?
Yeah, I guarantee that one of them has at some point.
Sure.
But
Or
no,
at
I
least
don't
on
know.
the BBC.
You're right. Where there's a Christie, one of those people. There's probably 500 movies.
Right.
Involving.
No, totally.
I met a kid in Ireland who was like obsessively like a mystery fanatic. He was probably like 9, but he was like a genius, And he asked me what movies I liked, and I mentioned I think that I really liked the Death on the Nile. And he was like, "Oh, with Peter Ustinov, have you also seen Evil Under the Sun, the follow-up?" And I was like, "Yeah, that one's good too." But it's like, how does this 9-year-old know?
It's like the chess thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think that there's something with mysteries where there's like savants. There's people who are really obsessive.
No matter what you're into, there's a 9-year-old hyperfixating on it better than you.
Right.
That's so funny. Well, this has been so much fun. I think, on a personal note, like, I as I know you've said in other interviews, like, people say this a lot, but logic puzzles are very nostalgic. And I had a whole year of, like, not having very many friends in 2nd grade and just ripping through, have as many logic puzzles as I could. So opening this and doing those was, like, a really fun, like, flashback, because I don't think I've done them in years. Right. So it was fun when I first, got it last year, to see that and, the nostalgia of that come out.
No, I mean, I honestly had not done a logic puzzle myself since I was a kid before making this.
Right.
But it's a similar thing. It's like a puzzle that, like, a bunch of people tell me this, that they did it as kids.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that it's not like that it is kid coded in some sense.
Yeah.
Because it's not any easier or harder than like a Sudoku than like a crossword.
Yeah, it's similar to Sudoku.
Yeah.
In vibe. Yeah, that's so funny. I was told this some too before, but it almost has like I mean this in the best possible way. Doing a logic puzzle feels like scraping like grout off of like a shower tile, where it's just like so satisfying because you put in like a little bit of hard work and you have these massive like fun results that you feel like I'm a little bit better, I'm a little bit smarter because I did this. But it's also, it's just like that really satisfying feeling.
Yeah. And one thing I like about them, this is a weird thing, but I've had some people approach me about doing tests, and maybe we'll follow up in some capacity, but generative AI, large language models, can't solve Murdles.
Good.
It's like it's too difficult for them.
That's the best thing I've heard.
Yeah.
That's the best pitch for the book.
Yeah, great.
I can't do this.
That should be the tagline. There's something to that.
Yeah.
Because like AIs can do like crosswords pretty well.
Yeah.
That's a little distressing.
Do logic puzzles.
Yeah, they can't.
I love to hear that. That makes me so happy. Man, that makes me really.
There is hope.
There is hope that the humans will beat.
Yeah. I'm kind of an AI
It's got to be like Terminator. Can you fill out this grid?
They got us at Go, but not with Murdle.
Yeah. Do you want to ask our wrap-up question? Some recommendations?
Yeah, that would be lovely for books that you
books that like were either formative to you or the book, or more vaguely, if a listener enjoyed this interview, what book would potentially, like, other than your own?
Right, other than Myrtle's 1 through 3, and Murdle, the School of Mystery coming out soon, and Myrtle Jr., and the board game, which is available from Goliath in the UK now. But other than those things,
will that be available in the US?
Yeah, it'll come out, I think, in the next month or so.
Oh, I'll be on the lookout. That's
we'll have to get that one.
Like a good time.
It's sort of a casual game you can play with your family. It's not like a, not pull your hair out kind of. Yeah. No, but other than all of the products that I'm hawking, let me think. I mentioned Christie. I read a ton of Christie before writing this book, and so much of that goes into there. I think that if you're new to Agatha Christie, you got to read And Then There Were None first.
Okay.
There's also, if you've done that, I like Death on the Nile the most, but I like it for reasons that you'll appreciate more if you've read others first. So I'd say And Then There Were None, Murder of Roger Ackroyd, a really great Christie. What's the first Miss Marple book? It's like the Murder at the Vicarage. I'm getting it wrong.
A lot of murder.
Yeah, there's a bunch. All Christie, though, I would say. High recommend. Find one that you think you'll like. Dive into that one. I also, when I was working on this, read Chesterton's Complete Father Brown stories.
Oh, wow. GK?
Yeah, GK Chesterton. Maybe I stole his initials a little. He's great. He's, like a very sort of, he's a Catholic convert. He's right wing is maybe the wrong way to characterize him, but he's like very, very Catholic, and the philosophy of sort of I don't exactly know how he would describe it, but like a sort of communal traditional Catholicism permeates these books. And so I'm not a devout British Catholic from the early 20th century. So we obviously disagree on some issues, but he is so good at using a mystery trope to convey some point. And each one of these little stories is brilliant in that it'll have some, that guy was actually also this guy, or the person who wrote that letter wasn't the person you think it is. And there are all these sort of very like clear and what almost seem like iconic kind of mystery twist reversals.
Yeah.
Cool. In an old school way where there's like, wigs and mustaches and kind of things. But they're so perfectly constructed, and each of them has some twist, and there's a payoff, and then there's a point to it.
Point meaning like a lesson?
Yeah, a moral lesson. Again, he's not.
No, I hear you.
And in fact, some of his stories, the reason I say that is that some of them are, like Father Brown is this real kindly, guy who solves these mysteries, and he can be wildly merciful to some people. He can, be very sort of kind and try to get people to surrender and to reform. And then sometimes he's just like almost vicious towards someone. And it's because he is morally outraged by them. But often you as a, modern reader are like, it's really bizarre and alienating sometimes because you're like, that wasn't that bad. You were forgiving to the murderer. But like this person who, maybe sort of made some jokes about Catholicism, you like hate.
Not okay.
Yeah. And there's,
so it sounds like you're describing the history of institutional religion.
Right. But it's such a great, I think that's such a great primer for that. And then my favorite mystery book ever is Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's set in an Italian abbey in like the 1300s or the 1200s. Cool. And it's very, very dense, but it is like it's almost like a tribute to Christie books, but in a very like academic,
more philosophical.
Very philosophical, really gets into, but like Chesterton, has like the mystery twists are used to convey like a deeper meaning.
Cool.
And he's able to use that genre. And I think that actually the mystery genre is kind of unique in this way that it's able to convey almost like a nonfiction lesson, a nonfiction comment by the identity of the murderer, by the reveal at the end of the book.
Who's the bad guy?
Yeah, you present a problem, and then you generally, when you're presenting that problem, are actually introducing like a thematic problem.
Yeah.
Some philosophical question,
right?
And then by revealing the identity of the murderer, you sort of answer that question. And when it's good, it's so powerful. But there's a Christie book where right after "And Then There Were None," where she becomes obscenely wealthy because the book sold like hundreds.
Where Agatha herself,
she just became so wealthy.
Yeah,
and immediately after then, there's a series of books where like Miss Marple is complaining about the high rate of income taxation. And it suffuses the books.
Oh, man.
That's so funny.
And so you have to, I think, be, on the lookout for that. But to me, I just love that ability to like have like some sort of social commentary.
Totally.
Or analysis.
Any genre book that doesn't, because I feel like sci-fi and fantasy is the same way, where it's like if you don't have a social commentary, you're allowing yourself to be shallower than it needs to be.
Right. Well, and you see a lot of times those books that don't have that commentary end up becoming sort of celebrations of like the status quo or like, the most powerful people. I do think you're right to make that link with sci-fi fantasy and that those can really do social commentary.
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes don't see that with mysteries because it's often not as present in the beginning of books.
Yeah.
But by the end,
it's very
they're
clear.
driving home.
Right.
That's beautiful.
It's a slower burn.
Yeah, but I love it though.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out today. Thank you for coming in. If you're sticking around on the show, we've got another episode coming out in 2 weeks. This has been another wonderful episode of Shelf Talkers. GT Karber, thank you so much for being on the show. If any listener wants to buy Murdle Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, the new one coming out in October, we believe, and then the Murdle Junior for kids in November, and then a board game coming out soon. We will probably sell all of those, I hope, the board game, but but at least up through the board game at Village Well in the near future. So come on in.
I'm very excited for a Jigsaw too that's coming out.
A Murdle Jigsaw.
Yeah, I can't really reveal more details of it, but I think that that's something that is going to be very exciting.
I'm happy for the brand to be taken off. I can't wait. So yeah, come on through Village Well, pick up your copy of Murdle, get cracking on these logic puzzles, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks. Thank you so much for being here, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you guys soon. This episode of Shelf Talkers is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced and hosted by Julia Elizabeth Evans and Jared Kassabaum and edited by Akash Timuluri, with music by Noah Vickland.